I am Quentin Schultz, author of the book Servant Teaching, Practices for Renewing Christian Higher Education. Thanks so much for joining me. A couple of things about the book and about this presentation, and then we shall jump right in. Here's a copy of the book cover. You can see me there making a presentation. See the exact title of the book, my name, my website where you can sign up for my email list, which you'll receive information then about upcoming workshops and webinars, and I'll be traveling around the country here talking about the book at different schools. My email address in case you want to get in direct touch with me, and a place where you can buy the book most inexpensively, super duper price on the book. All right, so let's just jump right in, shall we? About the book. It offers 30 short chapters, and I mean short, 3 pages each. That's short. I originally wrote it with about 30-page chapters, and there were 8 of them, and I sent it out to people who were teacher friends of mine. They said, nobody has time to read this thing, so I said, okay, I'll do it differently. Provide discussion, reflection, question for each chapter for yourself to review or for discussion with groups. It addresses both the mind and the heart. The heart in this book is important, and I think the heart is important in our teaching for us and for our students. The book is filled with examples, illustrations, practices, and it includes classroom and online education examples and illustrations. Now, more classroom than online because I've taught more in the classroom over 40 plus years than I have online. It covers deeply faith integrative pedagogical practices. In other words, faith integrative teaching methods, not just the content of what we teach, but how we teach. And I'm sure you'll find this helpful for you in your institution, for promotion, tenure, for helping adjuncts and the like. And the book is highly personal, very highly personal. I want you to know that I wrote this book from the heart for people like you. And I open up. I'm very transparent. And I say those sorts of things that we all need to hear and we all need to share. But often in the day-to-day work, we don't. And so we live more spiritually and emotionally impoverished lives than we should as Christian educators. So I think you'll like all these things about the book. Please check it out. I'll say more about the book in a little bit. But let's jump right in. I'm going to present 7 practices among the many, many, many practices in this book. And then we can consider those as critically important because I think they are. I selected these 7 because I think you'll find them helpful. Okay, let's go. First of all, let's cultivate a grateful heart. Cultivate a grateful heart. The condition of our heart is very important for our teaching. We all live on a continuum between grateful and ungrateful. And we get these resentments. A resentment is basically somebody we feel, let us down. They haven't lived up to our expectations. So let's say students haven't lived up to our expectations for them. We haven't lived up to our own expectation for what we think we ought to be as a teacher. Our schools haven't lived up to our expectations. And so we have anger and discouragement and all these resentments that tackle us and they hold us down and they really interfere with our ability to be great teachers. Our countenance gets infected. Isn't that a great biblical term? Our countenance gets infected and our countenance speaks. How we carry ourselves, how we look, what our faces look like. Are we grateful or ungrateful? Do we seem to be burdened by students rather than grateful for them? This makes a huge difference. So we need to be grateful, to cultivate grateful hearts. And this makes us likable to students. They like teachers who are grateful people. And the more we thank students genuinely from our hearts, and our thankfulness comes through in our countenance, in our actions, the better teachers we become. What are the gratitude growing practices in your life? How do you cultivate gratitude? Now, I talk about a bunch of these in the book. They're really important. In fact, I start the book this way, looking at gratitude because it's so important. I learned over the years that the teachers around me who are grateful human beings, grateful for students, grateful for the chance to teach, grateful for the gospel, grateful for Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit in their lives, these people tended to be better teachers because students like them and students want to do better for them. Students want to live up to this gratitude that's there. It's a marvelous thing. What are yours? I tell you, I explain a number of them in the book. One is, right, I'm in my home office right now, and I have up on the board here, on the wall, a gratitude board where I post ticket stubs, and I post scripture, and I post photographs and other things that are evidence to me of God's goodness in my life and things I want to be grateful for. That's one practice that I have, the gratitude board, and it makes quite a difference for me. Let's talk about doubters in class. Do we have doubters in Christian higher education? Of course we do. Doubt is very, very important. Youth are leaving churches left and right. That's the story to some extent of the church, including the evangelical church in North America now. It's losing young people. Their doubt is leading them away, but we don't want to be part of that. Many of these students are ambivalent about Christian education. I was just talking with family the other night, and they said to me that their kids had to go to Christian college or they wouldn't pay for it. I get that, but that creates a kind of expectation on the part of students that the Christian college experience may not be any better than their church experience, and their church experience or their Christian school experiences may not have been very good. So we get ourselves into these jams. Our day-to-day practices are incredibly important for being welcoming of doubters in our midst. On day one of my classes, I say to students, now some of you may have come in here and you may have some doubts in your faith. And I just want you to know that I do too. I grew up in a home where my father was an alcoholic, my mother was a paranoid schizophrenic, and it has burdened me my whole life. I've suffered from anxiety and depression, and I wonder, God, how could you do that? I've had close relatives and close friends die. I say, God, how could you do that? I have doubt. There are days that my faith seems strong and days that my faith is weaker. If you're in this class and you have doubts, boy, am I glad you're here. We will travel together. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. That's what I tell them. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I want you to jump on board with me on that the best you can. We'll work together on our faith along the way. And then I tell them that I'm the writer of the book of Hebrews is one of my favorites. Whoever that rascal was that wrote the book of Hebrews, wow, fantastic. He goes through all these great people of faith, and one of them is Abraham, the father of the Jews. And what does the writer say? He says Abraham went forward in faith even though he didn't know where he was going. And I say to students, that's how I feel some days. I'm following Jesus, but I'm just hanging on. I don't know where I'm going with this thing. And if you feel that way sometimes too, I'm sure glad you're in this course. It's going to be an adventure for both of us. What am I trying to do there? I'm trying to open up a kind of hospitable space that's honest, with integrity, with authenticity for students that come in who have doubts about their personal faith and doubts about the church and the Christian schools that they may have grown up in, where there was hypocrisy and there was some self-righteousness, and they know that. But I want to bring them along in the gospel, in the goodness of Jesus Christ. So I want to be as welcoming as possible. And so then when I'm open about my faith in the classroom and teaching from a Christian perspective, they're more likely to be open to it, because it doesn't seem like I'm just being self-righteous and moralistic, but I'm dogmatic, but I'm being openly hospitable with them, that faith is a journey and we'll journey together. Number 3, we have to evaluate ourselves. Do you evaluate yourself regularly? I hope so. If not, I'll give you clues in the book on how to do it, specific practices. I think this is so important. One of the things that I've been most discouraged about in my own walk in Christian higher education is the fact that so many faculty don't see this as a covenant. So we covenant with God and we covenant with our students. We have an agreement or shared promise that we will do our best together. That means we have to evaluate ourselves. And this thing that we have that's this, end of semester evaluation of a course it's of some value. Use them, be grateful for them, but it's not going to help us tremendously as a teacher. It has very limited value because it's the end of the semester. You're stressed. Students are stressed. A lot of students in schools I've taught in recently don't even fill these forms out, or they check on a figure to give it a percentage of this or that, but they don't make many good comments. They're busy. They've got a lot going on at the end of the semester. We need to have something better. One of the things I do is to listen before class. I listen before class. I get there early and I listen. What are students talking about? Are they talking about my class and what's going on, the assignments, the book, what they like, don't like? Are they talking about other classes, other faculty, and what they like and dislike about other classes? Often they are, and so I'm listening in. Not as a kind of bringing in the gospel, the gossip, but rather because I learn things by what they're saying about other classes, other exams, and so on. I learn things. I get there early. I think that's important. I also query students. When I'm meeting with them for coffee, or if they're in my office or whatever, and we're talking about something at the end of the session, I'll say, by the way, how do you think the class is going? What do you hear from other students? Don't mention students by name, but tell me a little bit. What kind of feedback you're getting? And I'll get feedback there and I'll make adjustments during the semester. Now I have a particular practice that I want to go over with you here. The use of anonymous index cards. I will give students about 4 times a semester index cards in class. And I say, don't write your names now. Just number them 1 to 4. I'm going to ask you 4 questions and just give me whatever comes to mind. And don't worry about being critical. I love criticism. Bring it in. And then these are the 4 questions that I use. Number 1, what's going well in the course? Tell me what's going well. Number 2, what's not going so well? Tell me. And they do. Number 3, what can I do better as the teacher? And so they lay it out for me. They'll mention things like, oh, those quizzes you give, those pop quizzes, I don't like those. And in the book, I talk about how I used to get that feedback a lot and how I learned to do pop quizzes in a way that the students actually like them and want them. How about that? Now you're really wondering what's going on. I'm going to sell some more books. Number 4, what can you as a student do better? What can you do better? So it's covenantal, and we're holding each other accountable. So I hand out these cards, and then the next class, I give a report. Here's what you told me I'm doing well. I'm glad I'm doing those things well. I'm going to do them even better. Here are things that I need to work on. I am going to work on them, and here's how. And then here are things that you told me that you all are doing well and not so well. And the students get to learn from one another, be encouraged by one another to know that other students are struggling with certain things. So this is one of the things, the practices in the book that I talk about that is really helpful for evaluation, which I think we are covenantally responsible for together before the face of God to do really well together. Okay. Number 4, we reduce busy work. Students don't like busy work. I get around to a lot of schools doing program evaluations, faculty evaluations, and often communication programs, but sometimes core curriculum and the like. And one of the things I get from students is that they don't like busy work. Now, it's perceived by them as busy work, partly because we don't explain to them why we're requiring it and that it is not busy work from our perspective. They dislike excessive and boring reading in particular. I'll say more about that in a minute with textbooks. They dislike high schoolish activities, what they consider to be, this is their term, make work, activities that, again, they don't see relevant. How do we make activities, how do we make reading more relevant so that they don't see them as busy work? And how do we reduce our real busy work? So for me, this is a big part of the book because I think we stress ourselves out We really do. I believe we stress ourselves out in part because we give busy work and we do busy work. A lot of our grading is busy work. A lot of the time that we spend in the classroom is busy work. We don't have to do as much, and we can invest our time much more effectively for the long-term growth of students. In fact, as I say here with the last point, I've learned over the years more and more to base my teaching on what is going to be important for students 5 years out. So when I'm planning a syllabus, when I'm planning the lesson plan for a course, I'm thinking not just short term, so we're doing a lot of busy work, but for the long term, what are the essentials? And in the book, I give examples, illustrations about how to do this. We may not cover as much material as some other faculty, but I think we serve the students better and we're less stressed out ourselves from my point of view. Okay, number 5. Assign engaging texts. Assign engaging texts. Long, boring, expensive, seemingly irrelevant. That's what students say to me about a lot of textbooks. When I go on campus reviews of programs, boy, and I meet with students privately, this is what they tell me about the texts. And sometimes they tell me they don't read it, or they just look at the beginning of a chapter, the end, the summary. They don't buy them. They'll buy a couple copies and pass them around students and all. The texts are just not interesting and engaging. The expensive part is amazing, isn't it? I went to a bookstore recently to look at what textbooks are being assigned in one particular program at a school, and I saw the beginning communication text was in paperback $145, and it was $180 in the new. And I thought, boy, this is just too much. Do students read them? A lot of students don't. They'll breeze through them, but they don't want to read them. How do we select texts? Let me ask you that question up front. How do you select a text? One of the things I do is have students review them. And I have a little form that I use, and I'll get some students and I'll say, would you review these texts for me? Just take a look at them. Usually senior students. Would you have liked this in this course or this one? I don't have students do it in groups because then groupthink takes over, and I don't get different points of view from different students. I talk about this in the book quite a bit because I think textbook selection is so important. It covers the whole ambiance of a course when students don't like the book that we have selected. And maybe some of you know that I've written quite a few supplemental texts or even textbooks themselves. And I've always used the manuscripts with a lot of different students and classes and sent them out to colleagues to get a lot of feedback. And I wish more writers of textbooks would do that because I think the textbooks overall would be better if we got students more involved. Less is more, in my view, when it comes to textbooks. Those textbooks that cover less but do it in a little more depth with better examples and illustrations so it's more relevant for students, those are the better textbooks. The best texts include personal stories. They include humor. They include summaries of what's going on. They're the kind of thing that you might want to read even if you are not reading a textbook and students don't see it as a textbook. At least that's my view of things. Number 6, tell stories. Tell stories. Students like stories. They're engaged by stories. We're created by God as storytellers. Students are story listeners, story engagers. So much education is about story, just as Jesus was a storyteller, a parable teller, and the like. Part of it is your story. Never be afraid when it's appropriate, to self-disclose, to be transparent. Use examples and illustrations of what you're teaching from your own life. I talk in the book about this and some teachers that I had over the years that could do this really, really well. Stories behind the material. We're not just passing along information. We're not created by God just as educators to shovel information. We're created to teach, to provide role models, to help students identify with the material, to put on the material, to wear what we're teaching like clothing. And to do that, I think we need stories. And whatever, in the book, I have a whole chapter just talking about this. The 5 different ways that we can engage different kinds of stories. Our own transparency, stories from future times we taught the class, examples and illustrations from outside of class, from within class. I love to use stories that have to do with when the material I'm teaching was discovered and how it was discovered. That's so interesting. And I love to use also biblical stories and biblical truth in terms of the story. So when I talk about lying in a communication course, I talk about Rahab. And Rahab lying, and then God seemingly being positive about her lying. Why was that? What was going on there? The students really engage with that. I talk about in communication courses Adam and Eve and what happens to their communication immediately after the fall, where they hide, they stop self-disclosure, they hide from each other and God. And then when they're required to communicate, what do? They blame. Adam and Eve, in a sense, are the first people with screwed up communication. And we can talk about that as they're examples of how our communication goes awry. And I talk about the fact that throughout Scripture and in our lives, we're hiding from other people, and then we're blaming other people. And that's one of the reasons we love to gossip. Oh, gossip is good, isn't it? Juicy, nice, yeah. Especially when it's only partly true. It's exaggerated to the point to make others look worse so we look better. So there are also stories of the class. What's going on in the class? I want to carry the class forward in a way so that you know what happened when I gave that exam last time and I was grading those exams? Let me tell you, the experience of grading these exams and how I felt as a teacher and where I felt like I was failing and where I was doing pretty well and how grateful I was to you all that did well on this particular question. Wow, you blew me away. Here are a couple examples of the answers I got on this essay exam. It's part of the story of the class. I'm reflecting it back to the students. I'm growing gratitude. I'm offering some transparency, all of it story wound through and through. And I'm forming community together. Okay, number 7, finally, respect students. Do you respect students? We all need to, and we all need to do it better than we do. Students in general do not feel respected because of their class as students. We often call students kids, don't we? What does that reflect about how we think about our own students, that they're just mere kids? Interesting, huh? Students have whole lives. They're like us, right? Students have whole lives. They're whole people. They have ups and downs, and they have up days and down days. And I'll say this to my students, last class I was not the best teacher. I had a down day. There were other things going on. I may or may not share those with the students. Now, the first day of class, because I think setting the scene on this respect for students, that first day of class is so important. And I'll say to students something along these lines. I'm really grateful you're in this class, and I'll do my best, and you'll do your best, and together we'll do the best we can as a community. But I want you to know that I will never evaluate you as a human being based on your academic performance. Then I pause a little bit so that can sink in. Because there were times when I was a student and I was not doing so well academically because I had things going on in my home life that were dreadful. I couldn't concentrate on school. I had other things going on that were more important. I say to them, you're going to have those days too. You may have difficulties with a roommate. You may have difficulties with your extended family. You may have difficulties with anxiety and depression. And I talk about this in the book at some length because one of the great things going on, bad things, but it's important in students' lives these days, is anxiety and depression. 35% of our students are suffering from one or both of those. And students will have these down days. So I say to them up front, I will not evaluate you when you have a down day, a down exam. And the first round of assignments that I give back, I make the same kind of speech. I say, if you did well on this, great. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for God for it. If you didn't, It's okay. I don't always do well, and I didn't always do well in school. We're whole people. But boy, am I glad you're in this class, no matter how well you did, and I'll help you to do better. We'll work on it together. If a student has done really poorly on an assignment, I don't give a grade. I ask them to see me, or I grab them right after class, say, hey, what can I do so we can do better on the next round? Because I don't want to so disappoint them with their grade. If at all possible, I want to catch that right away. Day one, I'm glad you're in the class. I'll never evaluate you as a human being based on your academic performance. And then when I address students in email or in text messages, I always address them personally. If it's for one student, of course, by name. If it's for the whole class, I'll say maybe dear students or dear learners or dear colleagues, because I'm a learner too. Or often I will address it according to the class. So if it's a class in, let's say, media criticism, I'll say dear media critics. Or if it's a class in public speaking, which I teach as servant speaking, I'll say dear servant speakers. So I'm trying to respect them and treat them on more of a collegial level. It's true, I'm the teacher, they're students, but we're learning together and we're learning from each other. And we have to respect each other as fallen creatures in a fallen world. We live under the shadow of the fall. By God's grace, we're moving ahead together and learning. And I express a lot of love and a lot of gratitude. First day of class, I thank the students for taking the class. I say, even though if it's a requirement, I'm glad you're here. And I consider it a calling for you and for me to be together. Every class time we meet, I thank them for coming in the beginning, and I thank them for coming at the end. At the end of the class, I will sometimes say, I know you had other things going on today that maybe even sometimes are really important in your life, but I was so glad you're here. I'm honored by it. So respect students. In the book, I talk about a range of ways that we can do this together. So that's number 7. These are 7, if you will, of hundreds of practices from the book that I just pulled out now that I thought would be helpful for you now, because I'm getting so much positive feedback on those. What's next? What's next? Well, let me plug the book here some more. If you don't have a copy of the book yet, get one, okay? Buy the book. I'll give you a link in a minute where you can get it very inexpensively, much less than Amazon Prime and all. Read 1 chapter a day even, 3 pages. Take you 5 minutes, okay? That's it. And if you do that and you make notes, keep a list of the new practices, the things you're learning that you can do, try out and tweak, it will be tremendous benefit for you. And I will be grateful that God has led me along to help you in that way. Go to my website, quentinschultz.com, sign up for my email so that you'll get notifications of other things that I'm putting out, about workshops, about webinars, and the like. Also, if you're willing to get some books to give to your academic administrators, a department chair, a dean, a vice president of academic administration, and so on, I will get free copies of the book to you to distribute those. You buy 1 copy, I'll give you free copies. I'm doing that just to help pay for the postage, when you see the price of the book that I'm selling them for through this website. So you can see on the bottom of this slide right there is the link where you can buy the book inexpensively for $15, signed and shipping included, and then I'll give you some additional copies. There's a little box you have to fill in to tell me if you want me to sign the book for you or for other people as a gift, and then also if you'd like some copies for administrators, and I'll include those free of charge and send them out. I really care about you. I care about your teaching. God has called you just as God called me to be a servant teacher. And we can do this together, learn and grow together and do it well. And I feel that God called me to write this book to help people like you. And so I want to encourage you to get the book. It may seem like I'm just peddling the book, but believe me, when you get into the book, I think you'll see that there's benefit there and that God has been good along the way. That's the feedback I'm getting from a lot of people, and I think I will from you. So please check it out. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for considering what I had to say. May God bless you richly as we grow together as servant teachers. Thank you.